Okay. Right here, man. This is the spot.
I can't see anything. I don't have my glasses on. Just don't put anything in front of me to read.
Sure. All right, let's get started. My name is Jeff Anderson, and I am here with a number of colleagues and also standing with a very courageous survivor who is and remains anonymous but did file this lawsuit today against the Boy Scouts of America. And he filed this lawsuit because it's time. It's time in his life to take action, to excavate the truth of the peril that is now and in real time. And this lawsuit is designed to not only hold the Boy Scouts of America accountable for what they allowed to be done to him in the early 1970s, but for the practices they employ in real time and presently. So this lawsuit that he has filed in New York seeks to require the Boy Scouts of America to come clean and disclose the 1,538 perversion files we know they have under seal and are keeping secret and have refused to turn over in another case pending in St. Paul, Minnesota. We also know that of the 1,538 files which we have possession of, but the Boy Scouts will not let us release without a court order, and which are opposing, we also know there are many more. Identities of perpetrators, just like the perpetrator that offended this now adult male. He brought this suit and he names the National Boy Scouts of America for their dangerous practices, both in negligence and in nuisance, and seeks a court order disclosing this information to abate the hazard and the peril, and also to seek some measure of accountability. He's now 61 years old, and you'll hear from him. But this suit is designed to get the truth revealed, the peril acknowledged, the identities disclosed, and across this country, we know there are 1,538 yet to be revealed in the files we have. We also know that in New York, in the perversion files that have been released, there are 130 in New York released in the files already up to 1988. That's in New York alone. We know across the country, according to an expert hired by the Boy Scouts of America, Janet Warren, who testified in another trial, that there are in America, according to her audit and their records, there are 12,254 victims, according to her testimony, 12,254 victims of Boy Scout leaders across the country. And according to her testimony, and she's an expert hired by the Boy Scouts, there are 7,819 Scout leader perpetrators that they have removed for childhood sexual abuse. 7,819. This lawsuit seeks to disclose all of those secrets, all of those hazards, all those perils, all those identities, all those locations where they abused, so the communities can be alerted and the kids can be safer. So to this courageous survivor that stands with us as a John Doe under the filing of this case, whose name is David. David, I'd just like to express appreciation for you standing with us today. appreciating both how difficult it is, but also ask you some questions, why you stand with us today and why it is you chose to bring this action. Just step up here and.
Jeff, thank you for giving me the opportunity to come forward and to talk today and to have my story heard and to maybe help some kids who are still out there and some adults who are still out there who are suffering from the effects that they endured while in the Scouts.
David, you are now how old?
I'm 61 years old.
And when you first came into the, and you were living in what part of New York?
I lived in the Bronx, in the Williamsbridge section of the Bronx.
And you were raised in a traditional family home, Jewish, and deeply involved in that faith community?
Very much so. I was a good student. We had tracking back then in the schools. I was in the #1 class. My grandparents were influential members of the synagogue that they had built before the war, which was located next to our apartment building that I was raised in.
And the Boy Scouts of America opened a troop there, and you became a member of that troop, right?
Right. A new troop was formed when I want to say about 11 years old. It was formed at my public school, PS 76 in the Bronx, on Bronxwood Avenue. It was co-sponsored by the Jewish Center of Williamsbridge, which was our synagogue. It was sponsored by the Ladies Auxiliary, and we had most of our meetings at the school, and then I think we moved to some other locations over time.
And at some point in time, you became very involved, and the scout master and the scout leader that led you into and through the Boy Scouts and your aspirations to be an Eagle Scout was?
Scouting was a big thing back then. It was, being an Eagle Scout was a badge of honor, and maybe still be today in some circles. To me, it's a badge of abuse. I made it all the way to Life Scout, which is one rank below Eagle, and had most of my merit badges to move towards Eagle. And that's when I left scouting, because I realized that the only way to obtain the rank of Eagle was to endure more sexual abuse from my scoutmaster.
And the scoutmaster that abused you beginning at the age of 12 until you left in your mid-teen years was Patrick Mancuso.
Patrick Mancuso.
And this is the cover of Patrick Mancuso's Perversion File, or the ineligible volunteer file maintained secretly earlier by the Boy Scouts of America, but was excavated as a result of a suit brought in Portland, Oregon, that is now posted and public on the LA Times website. This file, 1626, identifies Patrick A. Mancuso among the Perversion Files, and identifies as one of now 5,000 files that have been released, 2,000 of which more need to be, him as been removed from scouting in 1977 for repeated molestation of male minors during troop activities, male minors over a period of 3 years while serving as scoutmaster of Troop 270. That's in the first page of the Perversion File. In the Perversion File, that's the reason for the removal. In the Perversion File, they state, applicant, that means Mancuso, was advised that council, that is the Boy Scouts of America, was concerned in keeping this matter between him and the Boy Scouts of America. Between him and the Boy Scouts of America. That's what they did. And they didn't just do it here, they did it thousands of times for the last 60 years. And so, David, you're now 61 years old. You left scouting at the age of 15. You went into education. You're now working as a handyman and living in Minnesota. What is it that caused you to uncover this file? Because you're the one that found this file, correct?
Yes.
What prompted you to go on a search and find Patrick Mancuso's file publicly posted, his perversion file?
Well, it's something that I have mentioned to close family and friends over the years. And a couple of years ago, I was talking to my adult son, and I explained to him what had happened when I was in Scouts. And he said, well, Dad, there's no proof, nothing you can do about it. Get on with your life. You got a good life. Make the best of it. Go out, have fun tomorrow, stuff it in your past. There's nothing you can do about it. And that didn't sit well with me. I couldn't let another generation accept that. The people of power could abuse them with impunity. So I called the police precinct in the Bronx. I think it was the 42nd precinct in our old neighborhood. I called them up and said, hey, I was abused when I was a child in the Scouts. Anything you can do? No, nothing we can do. The statute of limitations has passed. Nothing you can do. I started looking online, Boy Scouts, what's going on. I see that around the country there are some suits, and that's when I came across the LA Times article that listed what they call the Perversion Files. And I think the Boy Scout calls it ineligible volunteers, which is a very nice name for rapists and molesters. And I started reading the file. It's alphabetical. I was able to very quickly find the name of my scoutmaster who abused me.
And that's Patrick Mancuso. That's this file right here.
That is that file right there. And the file didn't contain information about my abuse, which we had reported back when it happened. But what it did contain was documentation showing that he started a new troop after we complained to the parents, after myself and friends left scouting. We were in Troop 744. He went on to start yet another troop. And now, later on, it's come out, he had a troop even before Troop 744 that there were problems with. We don't have any of the records from that. So when I saw that there was some records, I said, well, maybe someone will believe me. Maybe I do. There is a possibility to come forward and tell my story. And then I started looking at the files of other victims, other children, and the files are organized by the scoutmaster's name, not the child. So I was looking at other perpetrators' files, and I noticed consistency among the cases. The same kinds of actions, the same kinds of behaviors, the same attempts by the council to conceal it. There's one or two records where they actually talk about, we'll call Judge so-and-so and get him to nullify this or get this swept under the rug. Others where, don't worry, I called my friend, the editor at the paper, and I made sure to squash that article. And I saw one after the other active attempts to conceal and hide and protect their interests at the expense of children that were being raped on a regular basis. I felt, honestly, more incensed by their concealment than my abuse when I was a child. It was 50 years ago. I kind of moved on from that. Seeing the concealment at the corporate and headquarters level was so infuriating, it was worse than the abuse I suffered as a child. And if it wasn't for this file and me seeing it and that knowing that I wouldn't be called a liar and I might be credible, it gave me the strength to come forward. And if not for that, I would be living with this in a wrecked life for however long I have left. And my goal here today is to get them to tell the truth about what they've been concealing for years. This is an unbelievable number of criminal sexual abuse from children that was concealed by adults. There's one or two officers from the Boy Scouts whose names consistently appear in the file, and they were sort of what I would call the cover-up officers. It was their job to sweep this under the table. Anyone, the public record, anyone can start looking at the files. You'll see who they were. You'll see who the people were at the Scouts whose job it was to protect the Scoutmasters and protect the information from coming to the light of day.
And David, as you scoured these files after locating the file of the perpetrator that raped you repeatedly as a youth, Patrick Mancuso, after discovering that file that revealed he had been removed for repeated molestation of male minors, that is, other kids,
Yes.
you started to scour the files of over 100 of these other perpetrators who had been removed for the same reasons. And what pattern did you discern? And in those files, and I know you made notes of all this, did you discern in any of those files that they had actually reported to law enforcement? That is the Boy
What I
Scouts of
found in
America?
every single case, the only time law enforcement was involved was when it came from the outside, either from a parent or an undercover sting operation in a bathroom somewhere or something outside. And every single knowledgeable instance where the council had knowledge, they did not make any attempts to call law enforcement, and in fact, they made specific attempts to conceal it from law enforcement. And there are numerous cases in the files that demonstrate exactly that, in direct words. No need to read between lines.
So I don't have to say more about why David brought this suit today. That is to disclose and force the disclosure and get a court order requiring the disclosure of the files that are under seal, that are maintained secretly, and are held by the Boy Scouts of America at their headquarters as we speak. And those are the perils that are present. And those files are from 1998 to the present in 2016. And in a case that we brought on behalf of a survivor against the Boy Scouts of America in St. Paul, Minnesota, and brought in Ramsey County 3 weeks ago, we sought a court order seeking release of 1,538 of these perversion files, just like this, 1,538 from 1998 to 2016. We appeared before Judge Castro, and at that time, Judge Castro said, "We don't think you have standing, Mr. Anderson, to require this to be done, although I'm not going to rule today." We felt a sense of urgency to get that information out there, to alert the communities in New York, in Minnesota, in California, across this country, who those offenders are, just like this offender, and where they live. And by the way, this guy lives in Delaware. I called him this morning. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But right now, we're talking about the files 1,538 that are now under seal, the Boy Scouts refuse to release, that David has brought this suit to require to be released now, and we urge the Boy Scouts of America to do it today, because kids are at risk as long as they hold those files and keep them secret and under file, because we don't know who those offenders are, and we don't know where they're living, and we know, in having tracked those people, that many of them are in youth care as we speak. And what we did is we asked the Attorney General to intervene. And as of yesterday, the Attorney General in Minnesota, Keith Ellison, former Congressman Keith Ellison, now Attorney General in Minnesota, has filed a request, or as a friend of the court, to intervene in this action in Minnesota, to do what needs to be done to protect the kids. And he said, as soon as we learned this was before the courts and this information was being held secret, we knew it was a danger to children in this state and across the country. I'm glad to use the power of this office to do what we can to protect the safety of the children. Gratitude to Attorney General Keith Ellison and all those that stand with us here today. Come on back in. And particularly to you, David, for making the choice to first investigate and then to excavate and then to bring your truth to us and then to stand with us today as a survivor for the truth and doing what you have now expressed you want and know needs to be done, that is to reveal this peril in real time and the choices currently being made by the Boy Scouts of America, because they are the ones that have the secrets, hold the data, and they're the ones that have to be held to account. And it is you that are standing up for the kids and protecting others.
And I'd like to say, if it wasn't for the New York State Legislature and Governor Cuomo, I would not be here today. Thank you, Democrats.
And under the Child Victims Act, and now passed into law in New York, it does give David and survivors across the country and across New York to do something, to take action. Because, David suffered with this, believing there was nothing he could do, or nothing that could be done for over 40 years. Right?
Yep, 50.
It's actually 50
Almost
years.
50.
It's almost 50 years. And until the Child Victims Act passed here in New York, there was no hope that any action could be taken. But it not only gives him hope, it gives him the power and the chance to do something to protect other kids. And every survivor that comes forward, we can protect, and that he or she can remain anonymous as a Jane Doe and a John Doe. It's time. It's time for the truth to be known. It's time for the kids to be protected. It's time to force the Boy Scouts of America to come clean. It's time for survivors to come forward. And they can call us at 1-800-IT'S TIME, because it is. Questions?
Yeah, question for a couple of them for David. To whom did you report the abuse? You said you did at the time.
To my parents, who are council members of the troop.
Okay. Was there any record of that report to the council members of the troop?
I don't know what actions the parents took. The troop disbanded right after that.
Okay. And did the perversion file that you have list David as one of the survivors or victims?
The perversion files themselves don't list victims' names. They're all confidential. So the public filings in the perversion files do not put any names in there. But our review of this perversion file shows that that report that was made by his parents and to the council of the Boy Scouts of America was not recorded in the perversion file. They just recorded that he was removed from multiple reports of minors, and that's all it says. It doesn't say anything more than that.
How do you intend to prove his case?
Well,
Victim testimony?
look, we can prove this case as any survivor that comes forward that gives us a credible report on the strength and the truth and the manner and means by which they share it with us. It is a sorrowful, painful experience that is not easily shared. And when shared, standing alone, David against Patrick Mancuso, we can prove it on the strength of his word. But we also have corroboration. We have the file that says that the Boy Scouts of America knew that he molested multiple minors, and they removed him because of it. And we also have concerns about where he is, as well as all these other scout leaders across the country that have been secretly removed. So this morning, we located him. And Patrick Mancuso, can you hand me that file I handed you? Patrick Mancuso, I called him this morning. David was with me. I said, my name is Jeff, and I wanted to know, this is the Patrick that was with the Boy Scouts for 25 years? He says, yes, sir. Yes, sir. I said, well, I'm concerned about you having molested the kids. How many kids did you molest? And he said, well, I didn't do that. I said, well, then why did the troop, why were we removed by the Boy Scouts of America from this troop? He said, because money was paid. Isn't that what he said? Because money was paid.
He completely denied it.
He completely denied it, right? And what else did he say?
He said that someone paid a lot of money to have him removed from scouting, was his excuse. And denied everything, and when Jeff pressed it a little more, he hung up.
And I said, look, I represent at least one survivor that you abused. And how many kids did you abuse? And I didn't, and then he hung up.
And just a second, Jeff. I'd like to ask my friends from scouting from 50 years ago, and they know who they are. If they're hearing this today, come forward. I know I'm not the only one in the truth. And I won't name names because I respect people's privacy. But I'm hoping that some of my fellow members from Troop 744 in the Bronx during the early 1970s, when Pat Mancuso was Scoutmaster, come forward and tell their story and start the healing process like I am doing today.
When,
Mr. Anderson, can I ask another question?
yeah, I just want to, when Patrick Mancuso made the choice to use his power as a scout leader to abuse this then youth and so many others, and lived since that time, he forfeited his privacy, and I'm going to identify his address and his phone number. It's Patrick A. Mancuso. This is the man I called who admitted having been in the troop and denied the abuse. His address is 268 Trellis Lane, Middletown, Delaware, Newcastle County. And his number is available because I got it publicly when I called him, and I spoke with him an hour ago. Question, sir?
Yeah, sure. You seem to suggest that the public files do not list victim names, but there's unreleased files that might. Did I understand that correctly?
No, the files that we're seeking seek the identities and the histories of the perpetrators. None of the identities of the victims get revealed. Those are all removed from the files.
Removed as in never kept by the Boy Scouts and are maintained?
No, the Boy Scouts have that, but we don't get that most of the time. So,
You couldn't ask or you couldn't subpoena the Boy
Show 'em the
Scouts to
blacked
say,
out.
is David's file in there?
the victims' names and all the files get removed
And the
before they're produced in legal proceedings.
Even if David or his legal name is in there?
Well, that remains to be seen, but one of the things that we make sure in the legal proceedings and in the files and the excavation of these files and the revealing of them, that we never reveal the names of any victims, because they deserve to be protected. And so that the victims' names are never a part of any of the records that are produced.
And to you, I mean, I'm not saying you're going to publicize the victim's name. But
We,
the attorney for David.
our own investigations reveals the names of survivors, and the investigation of this case already reveals to us, we already know the names of some other survivors with whom we have not been in contact, nor will we be until they choose to come forward.
And today you're announcing one lawsuit or multiple?
Today, we announced the lawsuit that David filed here in New York, and along with this, we filed 8 other suits, 2 in Nassau County, and a total of 7 in New York City. Why don't you say more about that? Raina Kessler, why don't you introduce yourself?
If you can talk about the Nassau lawsuit specifically, that'd be,
Yes.
appreciate that.
All right, thank you, Jeff, and thank you so much, David, for being here. I'm Raina Kessler from Robbins Kaplan. Kessler.
Can you spell your first and last name?
Raina, Rayna. And I'm with Robbins Kaplan, which is partnered with Jeff Anderson and Associates, working on cases in New York and New Jersey as well. And we brought the 9 lawsuits along with Jeff Anderson today. 2 of them are filed in Nassau County. It's here as well that we can distribute.
Can you just kind of give us the rundown of the Nassau County cases?
Do you want to do that, Jeff? Or?
Well,
I know
actually,
you're the local lawyer, can you do that?
Well, we're both co-counsel on those
yeah,
cases.
we're both, we're co-counsel. Our firm, Jeff Anderson Associates, has teamed up with Robbins Kaplan across the state.
That's because they're admitted here, basically. Is that what-
Yeah, we are
But
too.
Jeff
We
is
have
in it.
offices here also. But because of the number of survivors that we want to help, and who have reached out to us. We knew that we needed help, and we have teamed up, and we have a lot of firepower behind us. Today, we filed a total of 9 suits together, our firms, on behalf of 9 survivors. This was the lead case because this case seeks the excavation of all this data and information that's under seal. All the other cases are brought under the Child Victims Act against the Boy Scouts of America for negligence and the dangerous practices they've employed, and seeks recovery of damages and accountability, full accountability for the harm done to each of them. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, Stacy.
Mr. Anderson, can you just talk about the Nassau cases so we have it on our video, please?
Stacy Benson is one of the lawyers that works with us. Why don't we go through the Nassau cases? In one case, the perpetrator is Jerry Hayes. The defendants, of course, are the Boy Scouts of America, and it was at the Theodore Roosevelt Council in Nassau County, and the House of Hope Presbyterian Church were the sponsors. The plaintiff was a member of the troop 258 at the House of Hope Presbyterian Church, and it happened in 68 to 72.
And give us a rundown of the factual basis for the lawsuit.
Well, between the ages of 11 and 14, it's a negligence claim against the Boy Scouts of America for allowing that leader to have access to that kid repeatedly. Similarly, we filed on behalf of another doe in Nassau County, which is case number 7, which is against involving the Dutch Lane Elementary School. The plaintiff, Doe, was a youth member of the troop at Dutch Lane Elementary School from 1986 to 1989, when the plaintiff was approximately 8 to 12 years old. And the perpetrator there is Robert Izzo, I-Z-Z-O.
And there is an ineligible volunteer file available on Robert Izzo, and 2 others in our suits that we filed today.
And so those are the Nassau County cases, and the cases filed in New York are similar in the sense that they're all survivors of sexual abuse by troop leaders, all in circumstances under which the troop leaders are serial offenders, and all in cases in which the survivors could not take action until the Child Victims Act has now opened that opportunity for them to remain private, but to take action, just like David.
Can we have one?
Can I just ask you to summarize, without being too graphic, what these abusers are accused of doing, please?
Well, in every single instance, this is a trusted authority figure, a scout leader, charged with developing the youth, and under the guise of safety and in a position of authority, repeatedly and in every instance raped a child under his charge and caused that child to suffer in secrecy and in silence and in shame for decades. And in each of these instances, they did, and in each of these instances, the Boy Scouts of America kept that rape, kept that molestation, and kept the identity of that offender secret until forced to be disclosed by legal actions, both this and others that have been brought across the country.
So 2 in Nassau, 7 in New York City?
Yes.
All filed today under the CBA?
That's correct?
And I think one important point to make that David brought up is, this is 9 cases. We represent dozens of survivors of child sexual abuse involved in scouting and other organizations. And there are plenty more survivors that will come forward and more cases that will be filed. 9 sounds like a small number, but there are dozens and dozens.
And Miss, can you just spell your name and say it slowly?
Sure, Stacy, S-T-A-C-E-Y, Benson, B-E-N-S-O-N. I'm an attorney with Jeff Anderson and Associates.
There's a spelling over there. David, before come on back forward here.
I'm just mentioning you're based in Minnesota, or you're based in
St. Paul.
St. Paul?
So, first I want to express gratitude to you and all the courageous survivors that are coming forward and that now can under the Child Victims Act in New York, because it is you that now have a voice and a chance to take action and make sure we do every day that no further harm is done, but that we can protect kids in the future, and also help other survivors come forth with a truth they couldn't reveal before or do anything about, and no longer have to live in shame or in the shadows or in secrecy around this. So David, any last thoughts or expressions that you want to have that you have not already shared with us courageously?
I think the only thing I'd like to say is that just about an hour ago, Jeff called my rapist, and I listened to the conversation on speakerphone. And I listened to a cold-hearted rapist deny every accusation, deny what's in the official record, no remorse whatsoever. I was very hesitant about coming up here today. When I heard him deny it, it was the last assault I was willing to tolerate. And that's what brought me here today. Make the list public, out these rapists, and build a better future for our children. We owe it to our children.
Thank you, David. Thank you, man.
Do you have copies of the lawsuits?
Yeah, we've got copies available.